Just a quick note before we start this episode. I tried using OBS software to record the audio for this while I was videoing it, and it sounded absolutely awful, like through a tin can. I don't know what I did, so I re-recorded all of the voiceovers separately, so things might not line up perfectly, so I apologize ahead of time, and I guess we'll learn going forward. There seems to be a running theme of an obligatory tips and tricks video on every painter's channel, so I figured I'd make one too. But I'll try and focus on things that are overlooked and things that are critical in my workflow. So instead of preaching to people about thinning paint, I'll try and illustrate some other important steps. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into number 1. Bookend black and white. Placing pure black and pure white only at the beginning and at the end of a painting is kind of critical for shadows and highlights. When priming, I like to use a black primer and Zenithal Highlight a pure white. Now you can use colored primers depending on what you're going for, like skipping a base coat and getting it all done in one step. Black, white, and usually gray are the primers most people do it for. The important thing is that you're keeping this to the first and last steps of your painting. Since primers are painted over, it's perfectly okay to have them here. Once you start painting, you can add gray, white, or black to create a tint or a tone or a shade of a color, changing saturation or value. While using black and white in this matter is more of a modifier since it's in combination with a hue. While painting, I try to use dark and light versions of whatever color I'm using to produce a shadow and a highlight. If you really want to get contrast in shadow, try using a complementary color. An example is using a glaze of dark purple on non-metallic gold for the shadows. It isn't pure black, but the purple glaze, being a dark version of yellow's complement, can exaggerate the contrasting shadow in an interesting way without relying on black. The other side are highlights. As soon as you start painting something white, you can't highlight any further than that since it's bright white. Using a lighter paint or adding white to your base or midtone is probably the best way to go there. The best example is white armor. Start with a mid-gray and work your way up to like a very pale gray, saving pure white for extreme highlights only. To better understand how white operates, take a picture of any white object and run it through Photoshop. Use the color picker and just about anywhere you're not going to get pure white. You're going to get many desaturated hues, only finding pure white at extreme highlights, or where light is. Use pure white like an exclamation point at the end of your painting. Glints in the eyes or glossy objects and edges of metal weapons. Now there are exceptions, using white only to glaze over it for an effect like object source lighting. You're painting pure white, but with the intent of using that as a base for your light color. So to sum up, you can't shade darker than black, and you can't highlight brighter than white. So use your main colors on your palette, saving these two for the very last step. Zenithal Highlighting. This isn't absolutely necessary at all, but it can be very helpful in establishing a world light source and bringing out details, making it easier to find them. This style of highlighting can also be used as a value sketch, and then using only glazes, relying on the value sketch for shadow, midtones, and highlights. This is a very quick and easy way to get those shadows to highlights, although it does come at the cost of color saturation. I normally use this as a map of where light and shadow fall. I like bold saturated colors mainly, so I usually wouldn't just glaze over a zenithal. But it does help painting colors like red, yellow, and orange, as these paints tend to be naturally more transparent. Paint your minis inside out. When I was teaching at a paint night, I accidentally came up with the term of painting inside out. It's simply painting the innermost details and working your way to the outside of the miniature. Painting the skin and clothing before the armor panels, it's going to save you from making more mistakes. Painting the inner parts means any mistake you make on the outer parts won't really matter, as you're just going to be painting it over later anyway. Painting an open helmet and then the face means you'll have to fight around an area you've already established. I would paint the eyes and teeth first, and then the face, and then the helmet, working inside out. This isn't always possible, as some models can be convoluted like death card stuff, but I try to use it when I can to make things easier. Subassembly only when necessary. Using a subassembly method is especially helpful when a model has arms and weapons crossed over an aquila on the chest or something similar. Painting each piece separately can help get into the details much easier. This also helps on bigger models, breaking it down into manageable areas instead of staring down the entirety of a knight or a large demon. Downside to this, though, is consistency and lighting. You'll most likely have a visible seam or a break in patterns. Lighting angles might not match up either. If you have to subassembly, try breaking things where it won't be obvious. The backpack of a Space Marine is just going straight to the back of the armor, and probably won't be that big of a deal. But where a connection point is highly visible, like an arm grasping onto a hand, or a gap in a sculpt that needs filled, it's best to paint these as one piece. Recheck for mold lines. Right after the primer's dried and before any Zenithal highlighting, go over the mini once more for any missed mold lines and sprue clip points. On a raw plastic model, it can seem that you've cleaned everything only to have it pop up later after priming. Priming tends to bring out a lot more detail that you didn't notice, so if you do catch a missed mold line after priming, don't freak out. You don't have to strip the whole mini to reprime it. Just take the back of your hobby knife and scrape away the primer and mold line only in that area. Then using an airbrush or thin down primer in a paintbrush, feather in some primer to the cleaned area. You'll be all set to go from there. Take pictures of your paint bottles. Look, we all have a smartphone. You're either watching this video on it right now or you got it sitting next to you while you're painting. Use it for more than social media, lame mobile games, and, we'll say, questionable websites.
Disgusting pervert!
Take pictures of each step as you go. Place whatever paints you're currently using next to the mini. You now have a record of not only your progress, but a possible recipe with those paints for if you want to use them in the future. We've all had that moment of, I wish I knew exactly what I used on that old mini, only to forget it. This is also especially helpful when you have more than a few projects going at once and they all share the same paints. Yeah, you can write it down, but let's be honest here, snapping a few pics is super convenient. Take your minis to the lab. I have a distinct feeling if you're anything like me, you've got a bunch of spare minis lying around in a bits bin. Well, now's the time to use them. You have leftovers from a box set or freebies from a convention, or even full units that were supposed to be used to start a new army. Take these minis to the lab and perform just inhuman and cruel experiments. Use colors and techniques you've never even thought of trying. Use tools that you were afraid to even pick up because you had no idea what to do with them. This is where you can go all just mad scientist. These aren't for an army or painting competition or show off. This is just where discoveries are made. So pour a pint of good beer and put on some music and really just let paint flow. There's no mistake here. It's very easy to get stuck in a rut or a pattern and become boring and predictable. Also, there are a lot of times that this hobby does get, the feeling of stale. So stir things up a bit. I'm really famous for painting everything purple and green to the point of being made fun of. No matter where I start, I end up, somehow, with purple and green on my miniature. So now I make it a point to look for more yellows, browns, blues, and grays as my primary colors in the miniature. You very well could find yourself building more into your own personal style this way and learn some new things. So that's just a little bit I wanted to share that I felt was important in my paint process. It's not everything, it's just a handful of stuff that I really wanted to just point out. I'm sure others have gone over similar things and maybe something's new here, I don't know. So hopefully you found some of this helpful or at least interesting. So thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next episode.